Jim, thanks very much for joining us. My first question for Ebony and Ivory, don't know if it's an obvious question or not, but was Sky happy you gave him a bigger penis this time?
That's a very good question. I'm glad you didn't ask me why did I have the idea or where did the idea come from. I think he probably was happy, yeah. I haven't spoken to him about it, but yeah, I think he probably was. I know that I can answer with some authority because when we premiered The Greasy Strangler, which was at Sundance, and he had never seen it, he rushed out halfway through the film to vomit. So, yeah, I would imagine that this was less stressful for him.
I've not heard that story. Did he say why?
Well, I think he found it such an overwhelming experience, yeah. He felt so exposed. I mean, if you watch him in Greasy, he says that he put weight on for that film, but I don't think that's true because I knew him previously and he was always that size, and then suddenly he lost quite a lot of weight afterwards. I think he found the nudity, and so, now he's quite, he's a little gaunt. And that's coming from me.
So that's kind of a good segue to one of my other questions. You've worked with both actors before, with Gil and Sky before on Greasy Strangler. Gil, a much smaller role. What is it that you like about working with actors multiple times?
Well, I wouldn't say that I would necessarily want to work with actors multiple times, but there is something quite comforting about it, and yeah, I don't know whether what comes first really, whether just the sort of familiarity with people, then you start to sort of feel like, oh, these are my people, and this is how my work feels. They fit in the worlds that I create, or whether actually, I don't know. I suppose I do quite like. I mean, there's something a little bit repetitive in what I do, and I mean, I should try and break out of that maybe a little bit, but. Even whether it's the scripts or the feel of the work, or using actors numerous times, there's something I quite like about the familiarity of it. I don't know, and maybe I don't know. Maybe I'm a little bit, even though my work is quite, could be seen as quite pushing things a little bit. Like maybe I'm a little bit shy as a person, and I feel comfortable with people who are familiar to me. I don't know. Anyway, I've answered you way too seriously.
No, well, a serious long answer is better than a boring short answer. Thanks very much. Just something to pick up on what you said there. You talked about wanting to break out of being repetitive. You said you should break out of that. Do you want to break out of that?
Well, I just mean that if I recognise any tropes in what I do, then it just feels at the moment it feels more intriguing to go somewhere different. So, for example, I suppose in a way I've made 3 films that could all be classified like in their own kind of peculiar way as comedies, and the next film I make, I think I'd like to not make a comedy. So it's that kind of thing.
Right. We'll get on to future projects just towards the end when I get the knock at the
What
door.
they are.
I want to talk about the visual style and the editing for Ebony and Ivory. Specifically, the opening shot is quite stylized. I liked the pan, move, where the characters just get closer to frame. I'm curious, was that always in your mind as the opening shot?
No.
Talk to me.
Well, it was in my mind that they would both be on the beach, and that but no. That was an idea. Morton, who is the DOP on the film, he was the DOP on Greasy Strangler, and I guess that when we shot Greasy, we had this shot that we found very funny where we were panning between, I think Big Ronnie and Big Braden were waiting for this character Oinker to meet them, and he had a pig's nose, and we just kept panning. It's like when nothing really is happening and you just keep panning, it just makes us laugh. And then with this, Morton had an idea that we would keep moving Paul McCartney closer to camera as we'd pan to Stevie, then pan back, and Paul was closer. And to me, it was just very funny. And I guess that's one of the things about Morton, he's one of my best friends, and DOP, is that he's, there are some things that are really obvious, and they just pass him by and he doesn't understand. And then there are other things that he thinks up that you just think, well, nobody else would have thought of that. And it just felt a really funny way to open the film. Actually, when we started cutting the film, though, because even though it kind of looks like it's one continuous pan, it's probably made of 3 different pans and stitched together a little bit because...
No one noticed it.
Well, I mean, only because of where Stevie is with the rowing boat, that the timing didn't play out each time. It was a bit chaotic. So for it to sort of play out, we had to, within the pans, stitch them together, and then in post, make them a little bit more seamless. Of course, I would have liked it to have just been one take, but low-budget filmmaking, tight schedules, But when we first cut the film, we didn't have the panning, and we just had, and I think I just said, let's just get rid of it. And I was probably just thinking, oh, God, I don't know whether this will look good when it's stitched together in post. It's just going to be easy to just be, cut. And then we decided to put it back in.
That's interesting, because when I took the note of that, I thought I would have guessed that was on purpose, because I think that opening shot, the kind of the style of it combined with the score, sets the tone for the movie.
Yeah, totally.
Quite effectively. Yeah. I thought so. That's interesting to hear that wasn't the plan from day one.
No, well, I mean, often there's not. I don't have a massive plan. Like I quite like. I mean, I think about it all, but I quite like being a little. My experience has told me over the years that often the ideas that I like the most are the ones that just occur in the moment. And so you kind of prepare to have a little bit of a safety net, but I don't try to get too rigid. Of course, sometimes you'll have a very specific shot in mind, or something will play out, a scene has to go a certain way. But with this one, no. And then also Andy, who makes the music, he's made the music for all of my films, he generally will kind of have a conversation with me about a certain kind of approach, but then there's just like a sort of splurge of loops and ideas, and then I'll kind of sift through all the music and then think, oh, I like that. Yeah, could we do something with this? Could we, make it a bit more like this or whatever? And then I'll try applying it wherever in the film. And so the music at the beginning of the film, he didn't write it specifically for the beginning of the film. It's more something that I heard and thought, okay, that's going to work there. Yeah.
Gotcha. I've been given the knock at the door, so last question. At the channel, we are big fans of physical media. I'm curious, what's your thoughts on streaming versus physical media? And do you remember the first VHS or the first DVD that you bought or were given?
Well, streaming. I mean, I think that streaming is generally very disappointing. The options available to you. I mean, for streaming, I tend to just watch stuff off there's a US channel, the Criterion channel. So I tend to use that. I mean, I never go on Netflix. I think I have it just because my daughter does. But but you get a little bit lazy about. I mean, I've got a Blu-ray player that sometimes I plug it in and I watch something off it, but. Also, I've moved house so many times. I've got so much stuff. It's like, so I try to limit that a little bit. I'm not an obsessive, although I do watch a lot of films. First film, I was so. I mean, when I was a kid, we didn't have anything. My mum was a complete Luddite. I didn't live with my dad, and I remember on something like my 13th birthday, it was the first time she rented a VHS for the night, a VHS player, and I had some friends over. Yeah, I was 13, and she told me to watch Easy Rider, and then we got The Warriors. So they were the first 2 films, and we watched them that night, and gave the VHS player, it was Radio Rentals or something, gave it back to them the next day. Yeah. But yeah, those were the first 2 VHS films that I watched at home, if that answers your question.
Yeah, totally it does.
Yeah.
Jim, I better go. Thank you very much for your
welcome.
time. We'll call it there, and good luck with whatever you end up doing in the future.
Thanks, man.
Thank you very much.
Cheers.